Growth of cities. Why did urban communities grow? By the war years, gas and oil had already been discovered in Turner Valley. Oil companies began to develop in Calgary. Following the war in 1947, oil was discovered at Leduc. With this discovery, Alberta's economy, its wealth, and resources had a big boost. Over the next 10 years, almost 100,000 people would immigrate to Alberta. More development followed in the Pembina River area and the Athabasca oil sands. For example, houses were needed in communities near the oil and gas industries. Services such as schools, hospitals, and libraries were needed too. Alberta was gaining wealth from its oil and gas. Alberta could afford to develop these services. Alberta's oil resources became known as black gold. Immigration continued in 1951. Half of the people in Alberta lived in rural areas. By 1961, only one-third of the population was rural. Urban areas or cities were growing. The appearance of cities was changing quickly as apartments and office towers were built. These photos show Calgary in the early 1950s and today. Look at the photos on this page. What changes can you see in Edmonton and Calgary since the 1950s? This is Edmonton in the early 1950s and today. The Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Village. What artifacts and buildings teach us? What can artifacts and buildings teach us about the past? In rural areas, some old houses built by settlers were abandoned when they moved. As the buildings collapsed, artifacts were being destroyed or lost. A group of Ukrainian Canadians decided to preserve the buildings from the east central area of Alberta. Land near Elk Island National Park was obtained. The site was designed to show rural and town life between 1892 and 1930. Buildings included churches, heritage homes, a hotel, a general store, and a working grain elevator were moved to the site. People also donated artifacts that were put into the buildings. The village enables visitors to share and learn about Ukrainian culture, customs, and ways of life in both the both the past and in present day. My family went to the Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Village. At one of the homesteads, we were met by a lady playing the role of a young housewife. We could smell her bread baking in the outside oven. She invited us into her house. I loved seeing the different buildings. The past really came alive for me that day. Preserving our heritage. A class at the Prince of Wales Elementary School in Calgary started an inquiry. They wondered what kinds of objects can tell us about Alberta's history. Their list included historical buildings. The class was interested in grain elevators. They learned that Alberta's old wooden grain elevators were not being used anymore. Many had been torn down. The students wanted to find out more. Their research was hands-on and fun. They invited speakers to their classroom. The class found out some reasons why old grain elevators are no longer used. The old wooden elevators caught fire easily. Fires were caused by machinery, trains, and nearby grass fires. Also, there were sometimes dust explosions. This happened when a small spark or flame caused a grain dust floating in the air to catch fire. Larger buildings made out of fireproof materials such as concrete replaced the wooden elevators. The students felt the elevators were an important part of Alberta's heritage. They wanted to find a way to keep the story of the grain elevators alive for future generations. Their inquiry ended in action. They decided to write the Premier of Alberta. They shared their suggestions about keeping the stories of grain elevators alive.